Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I am reviewing Robin Hobb's Ship of Magic. This is the first book in the Liveship Trader Trilogy. Now I think you could actually use the Liveship Trader Trilogy as an entry point into the realm of the Elderlings. The Farseer Trilogy was written first, but this particular trilogy takes place in the same world, but a bit south of where the Farseer Trilogy takes place. And although there are some references to the barbarians up north in the Liveship Trader Trilogy, you could pretty much come at this without knowing anything about the Farseer Trilogy. But this is definitely the realm of the Elderlings with a kind of pirate vibe to it. And I would actually defer to my friend Chris, whose channel is called Chris Bookish Cauldron, on this matter. He probably is the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Robin Hobb that I know, at least on BookTube. So I would love to hear from him if he thinks this could be a great entry point. I don't see why not, honestly. Although I will say that there are the references to the barbarians up north, and it is possible that you might understand or even have some guesses at what's going on in here in the Liveship Trader Trilogy as far as the magic is concerned if you have read the Farseer Trilogy already. So you probably would be slightly more informed. Ship of Magic actually starts out in a way that for me was very reminiscent of the Farseer Trilogy, in that for the first 100 or 200 pages there was a lot of character development and some world building. But I had faith in Hobb, having read the Farseer Trilogy, that things were going to get going, and indeed they did. The plot really does take on momentum as the story progresses, and it really leaves you breathless for the last 100 pages or so, and really hungry for more, for book 2 at the end. Characters are what Robin Hobb does best, and she is among the best in the genre at writing characters, in my opinion. You give the book some time, you're going to find yourself really immersed in these characters' arcs. Althea Vestrit and Brashen Trell and Wintrow Haven and Ronica Vestrit are all just beautifully realized, round characters who are riddled with conflict, and they have a lot of good qualities and faults and blind spots, just like people, and you'll be rooting for all of them. You also find yourself rooting for the ambitious and roguish pirate Kenneth, who is something of a villain in here, and in spite of him being a villain, you do find yourself pulling for him at times. I couldn't help but think of a taller version of Johnny Depp. I apologize for that, but Pirates of the Caribbean has had a big influence on the whole pirate genre thing. But he is similar in a quirky sort of manner, and a very beautifully realized character. So I had a lot of fun reading his portions of the story too. And then there's even Kyle Haven, who is as close as you get to a kind of villain in this story. But unlike with the Farseer Trilogy, where I found that there were some kind of flat villain characters who don't get a lot of psychological development, in here every character, every major character, every perspective character is somebody who is really three-dimensional. And you find yourself, even in the case of Kyle Haven, who is a pretty arrogant, tough to put up with person, you find yourself maybe kind of understanding him and maybe even pitying him in a way that is just indicative of how good Robin Hobb is at writing characters. I also want to discuss prose briefly here because, in my opinion, Robin Hobb is one of the best in the business. There are a few writers in fantasy, in our genre, who I consider masters of prose. Tolkien, Ursula Le Guin, Neil Gaiman, Stephen Erickson. These people really know how to handle a sentence. And each of them has their own very distinct style, which is actually part of their genius. I rate Robin Hobb right up there in this group, actually. And her prose, I would say, is complex, but not so challenging that it feels like a chore to understand it. It's just beautiful without being flowery. And it can even be spare and very direct when necessary. As much as I love fantasy, I have to admit that there are few authors in the genre whose prose really holds up with the best in literature. But I'm going to come out and say that Robin Hobb is definitely one of them. Hobb has done an excellent job with her world building in the Liveship Trader Trilogy as well. Bingtown is the center of the story, although the characters do wander all over the place, this being a pirate narrative. But Bingtown is really the heart of the story, and it has a kind of personality of its own. It is a place with deep traditions that are being challenged there's some great changes happening that are coming from the outside, and some really big economic and political forces at play here. And Bingtown has a proud history. It's clearly encountering this time of upsetting change, and a certain way of life is being lost, and you really do feel that as the reader, just like the characters do. You feel this loss that is on the horizon with a sense of kind of dread at what the changes are going to be, especially as some of these changes are clearly not for the better. But you come to love the place even as you fear for it being altered for the worse. And you really sense that also it has some pretty dark secrets that have a lot to do with some past deals made with magic for the sake of survival. Speaking of magic, the live ships are the most prominent example of magic in Ship of Magic, and the Rain Wild Traders also contribute to an intriguing plot element as well. It's hard to discuss talking ships without sounding like this is a nautical version of Thomas the Train, but Hobb really does, trust me, Hobb really does make this work. And one of the most important characters in the whole thing is Vivacia. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But she is the newly quickened live ship of the Vestrit family. And she is, let me just briefly explain what live ships are. They're made of wizard wood, and a live ship comes alive. It is animate after 3 generations of a family sail it and die aboard it. And so Vivacia comes alive in the story, and that is a major important point in the story. And you'll come to really love and care for her. And she has, just like any other character, she has a really well-realized personality in here. And she has a story, which of course is central to the whole plot. There are some other live ships in the story too, each with its own distinct personality and story. And I suspect that a big part of the story, and even bigger in the following books, is going to be the secret behind the quickening of the live ships. And that is yet another plot element that really keeps you flipping the pages. So Ship of Magic has really solidified and even, I would say, increased my esteem for Robin Hobb as a writer. Along with Steven Erikson, she's a writer that I am coming more and more to admire as I read more of her work, and I'm really excited to continue with the Liveship Trader Trilogy in the very near future. Speaking of Steven Erikson and things Malazan, for my next video I'm going to be reviewing the first book in Ian Esselman's Path to Ascendancy. And that is part of my bigger endeavor to understand the world of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is something I'm doing in preparation for a reread of Malazan Book of the Fallen. I'm very excited to be doing that. So I hope you will join me for that review in the very near future. Until next time.